Hey guys, so even if you're new to the field of hair loss, chances are you've heard one word over and over again, DHT, short for dihydrotestosterone. This is a male hormone that our bodies make via testosterone. During puberty, it's essential for the development of so-called secondary male sexual characteristics. Things like facial hair, body hair, a deep voice, a broad back, and so on. The link between DHT and androgenic alopecia was established in the 1970s. That's when scientists studied a rare genetic mutation in the Dominican Republic that caused an inability to produce DHT. Boys born with this condition were initially classed as girls until around the age of 12 when they started to develop male genitalia. But interestingly, these individuals never developed hair loss, even at an old age. This observation led pharmaceutical companies to develop drugs that would block the production of DHT in male adults after they were sexually mature. And that's how finasteride was born. With the introduction of finasteride, scientists abandoned all other avenues of research and started focusing exclusively on DHT. And on the surface, this makes sense. We know that men who can't produce DHT never go bald, and finasteride prevents hair loss in 85% of men who can take it. Well, case closed, right? Not so fast. For starters, even though finasteride will freeze hair loss for 85% of men, it will almost never restore much of their old hair. Around half of finasteride users will not grow back visibly any more hair, and most of the other half will see minimal regrowth of the type that's barely visible to the naked eye. So although it's very good at stopping hair loss, blocking DHT is not very effective at growing new hairs. This at least shows that it's not the whole story. We know that by stacking other treatments on top of finasteride, treatments that are not DHT related will improve regrowth. This should not be the case if the sole cause of hair loss was DHT. In the decades since finasteride's introduction, we've also discovered treatments that have regrown more hair than finasteride could do on average. For example, combining minoxidil with regular microneedling sessions can give impressive growth for a fair minority of users, something that finasteride is unlikely to do. On average, this treatment gives 50 new hairs per centimeter squared of balding scalp. Compared to an average of 16 hairs for finasteride, this is better than a 3-fold improvement. Take a look at this data table that we tabulated from all the studies with average hair count improvements and the study's plausibility. So just to recap, just because blocking DHT will freeze hair loss in most, but not all men, does not mean that DHT is the one and only cause of hair loss. Enter fibrosis. So what are some of the other factors that might be involved in hair loss? Well, you've probably seen graphics like this many times. It's the famous process of hair follicle miniaturization, which is the hallmark of male pattern baldness. With each progressive hair cycle, the follicle grows smaller and smaller until in the end, the hair shaft doesn't even protrude through the scalp. This kind of graphic is absolutely true, but it's only part of the story. In particular, it doesn't tell us anything about what's happening in the tissues surrounding the hair follicles, the so-called perifollicular space. The typical story is that those hair follicles are sensitive to DHT, causing them to shrink. But this just isn't a satisfactory answer. We know today that there are massive changes taking place in the balding scalp. And we also know that the more advanced the baldness, the more extensive and irreversible these scalp dermis changes become. Principal among these is an accumulation of microscopic scar tissue, which scientists call fibrosis. You see, part of our body's natural response to tissue injury involves special cells that deposit a protein called collagen to kind of patch up the injured area. The collagen helps strengthen and rebuild the damaged tissue, kind of like putting a patch on a hole on a wall. But in many cases, this process can get out of control, and the deposit of collagen goes on well past the point where it's necessary. The collagen continues to accumulate until it eventually hardens to form scar tissue, a process called fibrosis. This is what happens, for example, in advanced liver disease, typically among heavy drinkers. The healthy liver cells gradually become replaced by fibrotic tissue that contributes nothing to the liver's functioning. Eventually, most of the healthy liver cells are replaced by fibrosis, and the liver just gives out altogether. Something similar happens with baldness, though obviously the results are never lethal because the scalp skin isn't vital to survival. When you examine samples of balding scalp under the magnification, you can see concentric layers of collagen around the hair follicles. Collagen has no business being there. And it's not always present in early stages of baldness, but the more advanced the condition and the older the man, the more conspicuous these collagen rings become. There are also changes to the dermal sheath, which is the protective sleeve surrounding the hair follicle, providing structural support and supporting its growth. As the follicle becomes progressively smaller, the sheath shortens, but it also becomes thicker due to a normal accumulation of collagen. The space underneath the now miniaturized follicle, which used to be occupied by the lower part of the healthy follicle, also fills up with fibrotic tissues. Eventually, many of the follicles disappear altogether, and their space is taken up by fibrotic tissue. At that point, the hair loss is well and truly irreversible. Though microscopic, all these changes eventually become visible to the naked eye. Next time you're around someone completely bald, notice how leathery and shiny their scalp looks. It's clear that some profound changes have taken place in their scalp skin, and that at that point, all the finasteride in the world would do nothing to reverse or even affect their baldness. At the same time, as fibrosis builds up, the supply of oxygen to the scalp becomes seriously compromised. Compared to healthy controls, men with baldness have around 2.5 times reduced circulation of blood to the scalp. But this reduction doesn't affect their entire scalp. It's localized to balding areas of their scalp. The areas on the side and the back of the head that are unaffected by baldness continue to receive an adequate supply of blood. And there is very strong evidence that at least part of minoxidil's effectiveness is down to its ability to reverse this reduced microvascular circulation. The problem is the boost in blood flow that minoxidil gives is short-lived, peaking around an hour and a half after application. It's not clear if fibrosis leads to compromised blood flow or vice versa. It's also possible that they are both the common symptoms of a third underlying factor. And one very strong possibility is that they're both linked to chronic scalp tension or tightness in plain English. There is some very compelling research suggesting that not only is the balding scalp chronically tight, but that those parts which experience the most tension are also balding at the fastest rate. One study found that the tightest areas of the scalp go bald first, as in the pattern of tension almost perfectly overlays the pattern found in the Hamilton-Norwood scale. Just a coincidence? Doesn't seem likely. More likely is this tightness encourages fibrotic buildup, possibly through the activation of a signaling protein called transforming growth factor 1, also known as TGF-1. It also restricts the normal blood flow to the scalp. Now, some people say, hey, just look at hair transplants. You can transplant a hair from the back to the front. Why doesn't it suffer from the same scalp tension and blood flow issues? Well, in hair transplant patients who don't take finasteride, those transplanted hairs will start thinning about 5 to 10 years later, all whilst the hairs at the back of the head, or the so-called donor region, are all perfectly fine and healthy. So, hair transplants actually show that the local scalp conditions really do matter for the growth of the hair follicle. In 2010, a pair of researchers devised an ingenious experiment. They performed a series of injections into the muscles surrounding the scalp. The substance they injected caused flaccid paralysis of the muscles, meaning the muscles went limp and couldn't contract for 3 to 6 months. As a result of the muscles relaxing, the scalp skin loosened and men started to regrow their hair. In many cases, the regrowth was better than you would have expected from finasteride, but with 0 side effects. From right to left, you can see the before and afters of some men who received just 2 sessions of injections to their scalp without any other intervention. Since then, we have had other experiments that resulted in regrowth just after 1 injection session. Now, while these muscle relaxing injections were very effective in relieving chronic scalp tension, they have one massive disadvantage. They are very expensive, with each session averaging up to $600. The cost can pretty quickly get out of control. Fortunately, there is a cheaper alternative, one that can be done from the comfort of your own home, drug-free and without side effects. This one option that's quickly gained popularity is the Grow Band. The Grow Band is designed to tackle the ongoing process of fibrosis. By gently gripping the sides of the scalp and pushing upwards, the Grow Band helps reduce the elevated scalp tension and thus can reduce the process of fibrosis. As the scalp is pushed upwards, the top of the scalp pinches and squeezes together. This causes tissue remodeling, just like manual scalp massages. It also helps improve blood flow, reduce scalp tension, and remodel the scalp tissue through massage. A lot of people are getting really good results from the Grow Band alone, but when combined with conventional treatments, the results are even better. Check out hairguard.com to see the latest case studies from Grow Band users. Okay, that's it for this video. What do you think about fibrosis and the role it plays in hair loss? If this video has been useful for you, then please hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you have any questions for me, and I'll see you guys in the next video.